Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gray Matter. Well, those of you who follow my movements around social media and the internet closely, not that you should, will be aware that I've had several really great conversations with today's guests. I would describe him as one of the most brilliant minds in Canadian podcasting today. He's almost too smart to be a podcaster, and he's also an aspiring politician. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time because he's been good enough to have me on his show. His name is Peyman Askari. Welcome to the program, Payman.
Hello, Leighton. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So before we dive in, and I tell people all about your background, as we always do, we have our framing aphorisms. Some of these have been selected in your honor. So you say you're not easily offended, so I'm going to test that right here. The first one is from someone we've talked about during our conversations, Dr. Thomas Sowell, who says one of the sad signs of our times is that we have demonized those who produce, subsidized those who refuse to produce, and canonized those who complain. The next one is from Sir Roger Scruton, the late Sir Roger Scruton, who wrote that every practical application of Marxist theory has led not merely to tyranny, but to social and economic collapse. And I wish that our Prime Minister would tape that one to his mirror. The next one is from Friedrich Hayek, who we know Mr. Bernie is a great fan of. I expect you might be as well. Who wrote, perhaps the fact that we have seen millions voting themselves into complete dependence on a tyrant has made our generation understand that to choose one's government is not necessarily to secure freedom. It's strange. He was obviously talking about someone named Hitler, but it's strange how applicable that seems to be to Canada. We've elected Justin Trudeau. Well, we elected him 3 times in 6 years. It's hard to believe, but we did it. So, who do we have on the show today? Well, Payman is a proud Canadian who believes that at some point every citizen must stop demanding more from their country and must instead begin giving something back. He's a strong supporter of individual rights, limited government, and the rule of law. He was born in Iran and came to Canada when he was only 6 years old. He grew up in West Vancouver and then earned his bachelor's in computer science from York University in 2006. Later, he obtained his PhD in computational neuroscience from Southampton University in 2010. Upon completing his education, he started work in the tech space, then moved to sales, business development, and finally, he decided to start his own company about 10 years ago. Throughout his career, he's had a passion for taking complex projects and simplifying them for the end customer. And I would say his podcast does that too. He brings this same level of passion and enthusiasm to the political arena and is singularly focused on simplifying political issues and esoteric language for the general population. And when he decided to run for public office with the PPC, he made the decision to simultaneously launch a podcast which is dedicated to simplifying the convoluted political landscape. On his show, he brings on average rank and file Canadians like me who share their experiences with government overregulation. He then packages those experiences for the Canadian public in a nice, neat product. And that show is called In Lay Terms. You really should check it out. It's one of the best things on the internet. I watch it regularly, especially when I'm not on it. So, I want to first of all get your take. There's something very hot that has been going on in the last little while. Um, Mr. Poilievre, the leader of the official opposition in Parliament, has gotten in trouble for calling the Prime Minister a wacko. Most sane people in this country would rather agree and wave their pom poms over that. And I seem to recall Mr. Trudeau calling somebody a piece of a word I won't say on here in Parliament in 2011 when he was a rookie. What's your take on this? Is this much ado about nothing? And what's your take generally on the CPC and their recent rise in the polls?
Uh, well, I have a lot of opinions on that. So, first of all, every single time the Liberals do something like this, they basically hand a win to the Conservative Party, which is, it's good for the Conservative Party. I got nothing against them. The other thing is, I I call it taking the temperature down. So we've got into this habit where you pick a side and you scream at the other side.
Mm.
So what I did when I heard about this incident in the parliament, I said, okay, is there any precedent for this? Like, Has anyone else ever previously been, I don't know, censored or kicked out by the speaker for using aggressive language, caustic language? Um, if it's happened before, then okay, fine. Mr. Polyev shouldn't have done it. But obviously, there is a bias, and the one that came to mind was Yara Sachs. So I don't know if you remember. She got up in
Hmm.
Parliament. She said, "Honk honk is the new Heil Hitler." Like
Yes.
that's very aggressive. That's a
Hmm.
disgusting thing to say. It's incredibly stupid. But like I don't recall her getting kicked out. So what's happening is there's obviously a bias. You know it. I know it. It's a left leaning liberal bias because they're in power and they don't want to give up power. So it's happening. But if I guess what I'm trying to say is we can't just shout at the other side and call them leftists or call them
Hmm.
liberals or communists. We kind of have to take a cooler heads will prevail approach to this and say, all right, guys, let's acknowledge that there's a bias. The speaker is biased. Let's stop respecting him and let's chart a path forward to reclaim our legislature, which is what I'm trying to do.
Hmm. Hmm. And that's more in line with the basic platform of the PPC, isn't it? To bring some sanity back to politics, to get away from this sort of these entrenched positions, left, right, which really isn't truly part of the Canadian culture and politics, is it?
I guess it's not. In full disclosure, I was not really involved in politics, so my understanding of Canadian politics starts in December of 2020. Nothing existed for me before then. But with respect to the PPC, they are like the best way I can describe it is a common sense party. So
Hmm.
you cherry pick what you like from the left, and we are in certain ways a labor movement. We support labor in the middle class. Pick some stuff from the right, like you can't have unfettered immigration. That's not to
Hmm.
say that immigrants are evil or vile or we should detest them, but you just can't have this much.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then you take some from the middle too. There's some libertarian arguments like limited government. That's what the PPC is. But if you listen to the CBC, the PPC is this far right Nazi organization that wants to, I don't know, throw all homosexuals in jail and enslave everyone. So there's a disconnect there.
Oh, it's strange. The CBC seem to be the only ones who don't realize that the Nazis were actually a leftist party. They actually put socialism right in the name. But speaking of immigration, this is something I wanted to raise with you. You came to Canada as a young boy, about age 6, I think. I'm curious to know, coming over at that time with your family, what were your first impressions of Canada, and what did you come to love and cherish about Canada that's made you want to be a member of Parliament?
I'll tell you the story from soup to nuts. I'll try not to get emotional. But so in
You can
Iran, there
get
was
as
a
emotional as you want. You're allowed to cry on this show.
you can edit it out, yeah, in post. So in Iran, there was there was the longest conventional war of the 20th century. I think 1980 to 1988.
Hmm.
So my parents had had enough. I think a rocket hit the airport. We were supposed to fly out, and they're like, "Screw this!" So we get in the car. We drive to Turkey. Via Turkey, we caught a plane to Germany. My dad had a visa. He used to work with
Wow.
the Germans. Um, Now, I support sovereign nations' right to do whatever they want, and if they don't want immigrants, I think that's a right. People don't like to hear that, but that is. Unfortunately, if you're an immigrant and you're stuck in that environment, it's really bad. So Germany was really it wasn't a good place. Like they didn't want us there. Again, that's their right. If they don't want you there, that's fine. But for us, it was horrible. So we were there for 1 year, and then we made our way to Ottawa.
Hmm.
And like the Canadians were just so they were so different from the Germans. Like I remember as soon as we got there, a contingent of I don't know what they're called, Ottawans. They got my mom and they showed her around the city and they were encouraging her, teaching her how to speak English. So it's night and day. And I guess what really angered me and it made my blood boil when this whole trucker convoy thing happened and COVID fiasco, um, and the Kamloops, the Graves, what do you call it? Residential school
The hoax.
hoax. Yeah, that hoax when they said Canadians are bad people. I'm like, I'm looking at a picture I have of my mom with these 2, 3 women from Ottawa. contrasting that with Germany, and these people are saying that Canadians are bad. That offends me. My lawyer is Canadian, my doctor is Canadian, my accountant's Canadian, my best friends are Canadian, and it's just I was like, this is unsustainable. So that's my view on immigration in Canada. I promised I wouldn't get emotional, but I did.
Your story reminds me of Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who we had on the program, and he emigrated to Canada to the United States, to California from India when he was about the same age that you were, and he told this wonderful story on the program of when his father, who had come ahead of them, greeted them at the airport, and his father produced a chocolate bar. And Jay Bhattacharya thought this was just the greatest thing ever. It was just became a symbol of America for him, and that moment, that tangible moment, sort of symbolized by the metaphor of a candy bar, never left him, and he's had an abiding love of America and freedom, everything it represents, for a long time. Um, One other thing I wanted to ask you about Iran, which intrigues me. We had a brilliant young lawyer who worked for us who was from Iran. He's in Calgary right now. He's doing very well. His name is Aydin Sadeghi. Maybe he's listening. Um, but he regarded himself as a Persian, and he's very, very devout Christian. And I'm curious, can you explain? Because those of us in the West, we think of Iran, in terms of the Ayatollah, as very Muslim, very militant Muslim country. But actually, there is a very strong Christian contingent in that country, isn't there?
There might be. But let me start from a historical perspective. So Iran, the area we call Iran, was like the arch enemy of the Roman Empire, whereas the Roman Empire was centralized. Iran was more like a feudal structure, and at the
Right,
time it was called Persia. So
right,
in our country, in our language, we say Fars. The people are Fars, and then
right,
it got
right.
translated. It's called Persian. There was an emperor, I believe it was Darius, who said, like, my bloodline is pure, going back thousands of years, and I guess the word for pure back then was Aryan, not the German Nazi. That's a different thing. So he said, I'm Arya. And then when the Shah of Iran came in 79, and I guess he wanted to centralize power by doing what Mussolini did, was to encourage, romanticize with the past. He said, let's change the name from Persia to Iran, which is why now we're Iranian.
Hmm.
To get back to your question about Christianity, way back when Iran was a pagan culture. I can never pronounce the name of the religion. I think it's Zoroastrianism or something. It's the worst name
Right.
ever. But they
Yeah.
were fire worshippers, and they did some weird things. Like if you died, they didn't bury you; they left you out for the vultures. It's something about not contaminating the earth. So
Hmm.
that culture kind of stuck with the Iranians. And when the Muslims came in '79, they tried to get rid of our New Year, which is a pagan New Year pegged to the spring. And I guess I don't even know what the Muslim New Year is, but they tried to do that, and they realized they just couldn't. Like like Iranians, they did get conquered by the Arabs, and we had to give up our religion and take on Islam. And truth be told, it isn't a Muslim nation now, but they
Hmm.
never gave up their language, they never gave up their culture. So we're stuck between these two different worlds. And
Fascinating.
it wouldn't surprise me if there's a big Christian contingency. There are some Jews, there are some Baha'is, Kurds. The country is a hodgepodge of different cultures. It's like, imagine Quebec to the power of 25.
So, what was the impetus for your family to leave? What made your parents decide that Iran, their natural home for presumably for generations, was not the place where they wanted to raise you and to raise their family?
Excellent question. And if anyone's watching who's in the freedom movement, who keeps saying, like, Canadians, shaming Canadians that are trying to leave the country, telling them they should stay and fight, listen to this. When your country fails, nobody nobody guilts you for leaving. And
Mhm.
any Iranian after the revolution that could leave, they picked up and left.
Mhm.
And when they talked to the ones that were stuck in Iran, they didn't hate you for leaving. They said, I'm so glad that you left. So
Mhm.
when the revolution happened and when they went crazy, like, things got out of control. So I'll give you one extreme example. When they took women, young girls, I don't know, 13, 14, and they were going to execute them, they somehow contorted what it says in the Quran, where like a girl can't be a virgin if she goes to, she can't get into heaven if she's a virgin when she dies. So they essentially they rape these girls in custody, and they justified themselves in doing so based on these things. So it was out of control. Then the Iran-Iraq War, 1 million dead on each side. I remember seeing the conscripts lining up to go to war. Like they knew they weren't coming back. So anyone that could, they packed up and left. And that will happen in Canada. If things continue like this, people will leave, and patriotism be damned.
Mhm. That's a very, very interesting take, and I hope people were listening carefully to that, because there's so much to lose and even more to win by supporting freedom and the things that made Canada the kind of country that your parents wanted to bring you to many years ago. So, talk about Iran again. I want to get your take on this. Obviously, you have a unique perspective on this. Iran has engaged fully in this Gaza conflict that started last October between the state of Israel and Hamas. What's your take on that? And not asking you to pick a side, but geopolitically, what's your insight into what's going on there? Why is Iran getting involved on the side of Hamas? Is it just that they have a hate on for Israel, or is it something deeper and more discreet than that?
So I'll say that I don't support Iran or Israel, but I support Canada. And my view is, if the International Criminal Court and the UN is coming in and is trying to strip Israel of their sovereign right to decide when to defend themselves, then unfortunately I support Israel.
Uh-huh.
Not that I hate the country, but I don't like to get involved in these conflicts.
Hmm.
With respect to Iran, eh, I don't know what's wrong with that country. Like that regime is, it's a lunatic regime.
Mm.
Um, they're by the way, their funding for all this terrorism, it comes from oil sales, and those oil sales, that's the people's treasure. So what they're doing, if you talk to Iranians on the ground, they say, can you please convince America to drop a rocket somewhere in Iran? They could hit a sand dune, it doesn't matter. Just scare this regime to stop funding Hezbollah and to stop funding Hamas, and to give that money back to us.
Hmm.
So I don't really know why they're doing it, beyond maybe comparing it to like the CCP, or maybe even I wouldn't even compare it to Russia. Like the CCP is an evil transnational criminal organization that's hell bent on gaining more power, and
Hmm.
that's the only way I can think of the regime in Iran doing these things to destabilize the region when they're playing with fire because Israel has nukes.